Mark Twain once said, "It ain't those parts of the Bible that I can't understand that bother me. It's the parts that I do understand." If we're honest, we have to agree with him. Nevertheless, I guess we've all got stuck on a verse of the Bible at some time and just wanted someone to explain it to us. And Googling tends to lead us to some dodgy websites we probably shouldn't trust. So we think, maybe I should do this properly and get hold of a commentary. But where on earth do we start? Now, I'm not going to make any recommendations in this video, but I do want to help you have some realistic expectations. The first thing to realize is that we read the Bible in a number of different ways, and a commentary won't always help us. The most accessible way to read the Bible is devotionally. This means that we want to hear God speak to us personally through the scriptures, words of encouragement and life. These are the kinds of verses we stick up on the fridge or post on Facebook. It's really important to read the Bible devotionally, but a verse-by-verse commentary probably won't help us, because in reality most verses have limited devotional use. I'm probably safe in saying that most of the book of Numbers or Leviticus have never been quoted on Facebook, and if they were, the post would probably be banned. So ploughing through a commentary verse by verse to find inspiration and life will probably frustrate you. Rather, buy a book of devotional readings from one of your favourite teachers. The second way we read is for application. We want to know what we should do with Paul's teaching on women and head coverings today, for example, or Jesus' teaching on forgiving our brother 70 times 7. Again, this is not the strong point of commentaries. In fact, commentaries that try to preach to us are probably the most frustrating. When we try to apply a passage, we have to be sensitive to the current culture and context. So commentaries that do try to do this feel out of date very quickly. They answer questions that no one is asking anymore. They miss the questions that people are asking. Again, rather find a present-day teacher you trust who has said something about this passage. The third way we read is for theology. We want to know what the Bible teaches about creation or the end times or grace or something else. Now, a commentary can be a helpful tool to getting to grips with a particular passage. But in general, it's a bit like looking at the scenery through a telescope. Great for detail, but lacking in the broad perspective that you need for the task of doing theology. Most commentaries will make some theological observations as they go, but those observations are often unbalanced and strongly flavoured by the theological allegiance of the writer. So a Calvinist commentator, for example, will highlight the theological significance of all the verses that support his position and gloss over those that don't. Don't let this worry you. I've learnt to ignore the theological detours, chew the meat and spit out the bones. If you want honest theology, rather get an explicitly theological book about the topic that interests you, or a text of systematic theology. The final way we read, or rather we ought to read, is to study. In particular, we ask this question: how did the original hearers all those centuries ago understand what's being said here? And this is where the commentary should come into its own. A good commentary will help us at a number of levels with this task. First of all, with textual integrity. Every book in the Bible has come to us as a handwritten copy of an earlier manuscript. Are we sure we know what it originally said? A commentary will point out if there are some doubtful words. We don't want to build a whole theology on something the Bible probably doesn't say. Secondly, culture and language. The Bible, of course, was written in a foreign language, Hebrew or Greek, or some bits in Aramaic, to a people with customs very different from our own. So it's really helpful to learn about the subtleties of translation and idioms and figures of speech and so on. That can totally change the meaning of a verse. What did Jesus mean when he said the eye was the lamp of the body, for example? Look it up. The third is with flow. The Bible is a whole collection of stories, and sometimes the flow of those stories doesn't quite make sense to us. The commentary will explain the flow of thought from one verse to the next and one chapter to the next. In the same way, when Paul gets sidetracked and writes really long sentences, as he often does, the commentary will help us navigate through his digressions and not lose the thread of the argument. Fourth is political context. Every book in the Bible has an angle to it. It's written with a specific agenda in mind, which affects what the author chooses to say and how he chooses to say it. The verse which seems to say one thing was possibly written to address a totally different question. So we should look for a commentary that seems to give you lots of good stuff on textual integrity, culture, language, narrative flow, political context. If it doesn't have that, it's not much use. And if it does throw in some theological interpretation that maybe you can't swallow, that's okay, just ignore it. Now please resist the temptation to get the spiritual equivalent of a Swiss Army knife or a Leatherman. You know, one of those all-in-one tools. No self-respecting plumber would turn up for work with just a Leatherman. He has a bag full of specific tools for each task. Also, be aware that a one-volume commentary is probably going to frustrate you. If you went to your GP and he had just one book on his shelf, the GP's bumper book of medicine, you'd probably be quite worried. You hope that he's read rather more than that. A one-volume commentary of the Bible can give you a nice overview, but there is so much more knowledge out there. It's highly unlikely your specific question will be answered in that brief summary. So if a one-volume commentary is a bit useless, and a full-blown set may set you back $1,000, even for digital versions, what do? Well, there are some 3 or 4 volume sets which might be a reasonable compromise. Alternatively, I'd really encourage you to consider buying a one-volume commentary on a single book of the Bible, say one of the Gospels. Make a start there. Make that a study project. It won't help you when you find a weird verse in Deuteronomy, but it's probably a better exercise in the long run. The OCD among us will salivate at the thought of having a complete set of commentaries. But do you really need one in the book of Obadiah or Nahum? I also want to encourage you to look at a commentary even for the bits of the Bible you think you do understand. You might be surprised. A great study strategy is to pick a chapter and read it in a couple of translations and write down some questions. Then look at your commentary and see what it says. I hope this has been helpful. Happy studying.